Happy Friday, everybody. It's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here for Live Weather Impact. It is now May the 8th, 2026. We made it to the end of the week. We're going into the weekend, and as much as I'd love to see more rain, it is nice to have a gorgeous day like today. Had all that rain Wednesday night, Thursday morning, had a few storms in the afternoon. We were tracking at this very time yesterday. Now we've got, this is what I call Chamber of Commerce weather. When you look outside, it was sunny for most of the day. We're now seeing this high, thin cirrus deck, which is kind of fascinating because it makes for kind of a milky sunshine, but it also is a sign that there is some moisture to our south. And this is our only rain chance for the weekend. I've actually lowered the rain chances for both Saturday and Sunday, but if we're going to see rain, it's going to be because of this system to the south. You could see it's mainly going east, and what I mean by that, most of the energy is going off in this direction, but the high clouds, the high-level moisture, is spreading to the north and east, and that's why we're seeing some of those clouds. Today, cooler than average, 50 this morning, 71 this afternoon. That's like April weather. We joke with Tim all the time. It feels like we didn't get much of an April because April weather is like this. Cool mornings, nice comfortable afternoons, not hot, not humid. And now it looks like May, we're kind of making up for all the hot weather we had. Not that it was humid in April, but we really did have a very, very warm month of March and April. It was way above. In fact, it was the second and third warmest those 2 months on record. Right now, we're still sitting at 70 degrees, but it's very dry out there. Dew points are still in the 30s, but they are creeping up. Some 40s showing up, and that's not very moist. But compared to earlier, we had a lot drier air, so it does seem like some moisture is beginning to move into the area. So tonight, if you're out and about, we're going to see those increasing high clouds continue to pump into the region. Temperatures, I still think, make it down into the 50s, but the cloud cover is going to be really key to this. You know how it works. Radiational cooling. The ground absorbs the sunlight during the day. It releases it at night. If there's clouds to trap it, it bounces back and forth and then keeps us a little warmer. It's like a blanket on the bed. It keeps us just a tad warmer. If we don't have clouds, much cooler. Have a little clouds, then a tad warmer. Tomorrow, after a 20% chance of a few sprinkles in the morning, which I'll show you here in a minute, it's going to be a glorious day. Upper 70s near 80 degrees, about as normal a early May day as you're going to get. So where does that 20% come from? Well, let me show you. So tonight, you see the high clouds streaming in. We'll go through tomorrow morning. I'll try to play this if my computer will let me. Come on, computer. It's struggling. There we go. We'll go through tomorrow morning. So 7 a.m., you see upper 50s, low 60s. There's a few showers around coming up from the southeast. Again, not a lot showing up in our futurecast, but I will not be shocked to see a few isolated showers kind of scooting through the region early on between 9 and 11, and then it completely dries out by the afternoon. So even if we see a few sprinkles in the morning, I do not think it's going to have a big impact on anything. If you're going to the truest, I don't want to carry an umbrella all day for a 20% chance. I would just gut it out. If it does sprinkle, go under a tree. It's not a thunderstorm. Go under a tent, seek shelter, or just get wet for a minute. It'll dry out pretty quickly. And then Sunday, I really lowered the rain chances completely for Mother's Day all the way in the afternoon. Look at this, low to mid 80s. You cannot ask for a better day. It is going to be absolutely amazing. And then Monday, here comes our rain chance. We do see a few showers coming in Monday morning into the first half of the day. I don't think it's a big deal for the commute because it doesn't look like it's much of anything until well after then. And then that even moves out fairly quickly in the afternoon. But we do have a rain chance for Monday. So the rain chances overall, they're much lower than yesterday, and that's just because that's the trend. We're seeing a trend for drier conditions moving in. Very small chance tomorrow, small chance Sunday night, Monday morning, even tinier chance Wednesday night. In fact, you won't see that reflected in the 7-day because it's going to happen at night. We kind of give you the daytime forecast, but this is a little concerning. We got all that rain. People are super excited. We finally put a tiny dent in the drought, but then here's the next 7 days, below average rainfall again. So this is not what we want to see. To get out of the drought, it's not so much about the heavy rain for one event. It's about the consistency of seeing rain every 2 or 3 days to help maintain the moisture. If you maintain the moisture in the plants, the soil, then you can start talking about runoff into our water system to help get the water storage replenished. We're not replenishing our water storage right now. But if you're going out to the truest, Tim and I will talk a lot about this golf going on this weekend. It was spectacular. Today, I jokingly call these Chamber of Commerce days. If you would have watched the coverage of the truest and seen the aerials of the city and the scenery, it really did kind of sell like how great Charlotte is. It was just absolutely gorgeous out there. So a few sprinkles early tomorrow, then clearing out Sunday for Mother's Day. absolutely picture perfect. The wind, I was watching a lot of the coverage today. There was a lot of golfers and caddies like kind of, I wouldn't say concerned, but they were having trouble figuring out the wind because it was light and variable. It was changing. It wasn't really one direction. The weekend, they won't have as much an issue. It's going to be consistently right out of the southwest. And the one thing you will have is probably gusty conditions on, I wouldn't say super gusty, but the gustiest day, maybe 20-mile-per-hour gusts tomorrow. Sunday looks like almost no wind at all. It looks like it's going to be little to no wind. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal. But the concern here for a lot of the golfers was there wasn't consistent direction. That's going to be consistent this weekend. So we should have no issues with the consistency of the wind this weekend. It's all southwest throughout the weekend. So if you have plans with mom this weekend, you really have nothing to worry about. If you're doing a brunch or a cookout or, whatever it is, just make sure mom's taking it easy. She's going to have a great day on Sunday. We might top out at 85. Most of the day will be in the 80s. Your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast shows after that front Monday morning, 40% chance of some showers, maybe a rumble of thunder. Then much cooler next week with temperatures in the morning, 40s and 50s. Afternoon highs in the 70s, and you're probably saying, that doesn't seem too cool. It is for this time of year. Average high now is close to 80. Average low is in the mid-50s. So a little bit below to slightly near average. But next weekend, summer lovers, here's your first hint at summer. And this is usually right on schedule. You get to the middle of May, it's like when we start to see the flip to summer. Upper 80s, near 90. That happens next weekend. So a lot of pools will be opening up. I know our pools open up this weekend. A lot will be opening up over the next few weekends, but get ready. Here comes the heat. So stick around. Tim Buckley's going to join me. We'll be right back, and we'll talk more about the weekend forecast and everything else going on weather-wise here on Live Weather Impact.
Weather Impact Live with Brad Panovich is sponsored by Moisture Lock, crawl space, basement, and foundation repair experts serving the Carolinas since 1988.
Tired of all this rain? Does your yard look like a swamp after it rains? Hi, I'm Greg Doggett with Moisture Lock, Charlotte's premier waterproofing and foundation repair company. The longer water sits, the softer soil will become. This can cause foundation issues. If you're having drainage issues, contact Moisture Lock. We'll get the water away from your home and out of your yard.
Moisture Lock, stabilize, enhance, protect.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It is a beautiful day across the Carolinas. I think that's kind of the story today. Tim Buckley joins me as always from WFMY. Tim, welcome in. I'd love to see more rain, but this is a great day. Let's be honest. It's kind of nice when you get a big downpour like we had yesterday, kind of a rainy, gloomy day. And I jokingly call this Chamber of Commerce weather, but if you watched any of the Truist on the ESPN app or anywhere else, the aerials from Charlotte and the golf course just confirmed my views of like how nice a day it was and how it made the city look great, because it was absolutely beautiful today.
Well, what all the visitors and the tourists and the golfers and the media that come into town, what they should know is that it's always like this. It's always 70 and sunny here in the Carolinas. Never any humidity, certainly, and definitely not any rain either. But it's pretty nice, Brad. You got to enjoy the nice days, even if we're in a drought. We can't change the weather. You might as well enjoy it. So it's not your fault. It's not raining. It's not my fault. Your fault. Yours fault. Just enjoy.
Yeah, it is super nice, and it is interesting watching, some of the coverage out there and how wet the course was. I live close to the course. I always joke that I have a sentimental value for this event because it's been in Charlotte as long as I've been here. So it's like, and I live right by the course. So I had this it's one of my favorite events. But what was interesting today, Tim, I keep this like pretty diligent stats about the tournament, and just because I'm a golfer too, and so I've kept this stat of database basically. I keep a spreadsheet of all the rain rounds 1 through 4. And yesterday's rain at the course over 2 inches, that's the most rain they have seen on this tournament for any of the rounds combined since it's been here, since 2003. And what was interesting today is they were doing what's called the lift, clean, in place. And if you're not a golfer, ever watch golf, because of how muddy and wet it was, after every shot, the golfer was allowed to pick up their ball, clean it off, and put it back down before they hit it, which is kind of a good if you're a golfer, that's a huge advantage, because you're not hitting a mud ball. You don't have to hit it where it lies. You get to place it pretty much in the perfect spot. But it kind of shows you how wet the course was today, Tim, because of all the rain we got yesterday.
And so, not everyone watching might be a golfer. I'm actually not much of a golfer either, but I'll watch it every now and then. The rain coming down, making things softer on the surface, did it have an effect on the greens or on the fairways? Were things a little bit slower? Were they scoring lower? Well, what was the effect on the players?
It definitely had an impact. So knowing that we're in a drought, and I was hearing from some of the other people, not from the course individual, but from other greenskeepers at other courses, they were saying the course was having trouble because of the drought, keeping everything lush and green. They were doing a lot of watering, but it's been bone dry. And so it did kind of soften up the fairways in particular. And if you don't know anything about Quail Hollow, it's a long course to begin with, which means the yardage is already long. When a course is wet, it plays even longer, because when you hit the ball, it doesn't roll out, right? It kind of plugs or sticks. So it's made the course play super long. Now the greens, I don't know, I've watched it. The greens look just as hard as always. They got that mini Verde Bermuda now that they grow, and it seems like it doesn't matter what you do to those greens, they're always super fast. But the fairways for sure, Tim, seemed like the ball just wasn't rolling out because of how wet it was. But what also is interesting, you would think with all the warm weather, the rough, which is on the edge, would be super thick, but because of the drought, it hadn't grown very tall. So a lot of the commentators at least were saying, the rough is there, but it wasn't as tall as they expected because it just wasn't growing as much because of the lack of rain. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the weekend, because now it dries out.
Right. So every day probably gets a little bit harder, a little bit faster, a little tougher to make some of those putts out there, and maybe harder to score low. And the weather has a lot of impacts when it comes to golfing, right? This is something that we see probably every year with our tournaments locally, but also around the country.
Yeah, and watching today, there was a lot of commentary about the wind, and I thought this was interesting. I never really thought about it this way, but the commentator was saying, he was a former caddy. He says, I think caddies and golfers don't mind if it's windy as long as it's a consistent direction. They were complaining today, Tim, because we had kind of high pressure. It was light and variable, so the wind was changing frequently, direction and speed, and it was really playing with the players' minds a little bit. And I thought that was interesting. I never really thought about that. I thought today would have been like perfect, but they said, I'd rather be breezy, but all be from one direction, which is kind of what's going to happen the next 2 days, because we're going to see more of a southwest wind. And it's kind of cool to watch the satellite imagery, because you can kind of see what's heading our way, because you see that high cloud deck. That's the stalled front and kind of a wave of low pressure along the Gulf Coast, and that's going to be our predominant flow going into the weekend. Is kind of southwest, but unlike yesterday where we had some guidance go crazy with the rain, I think everything got more sensible today, and I actually cut down our rain chances overall for the weekend because it just looks like, outside of a few sprinkles maybe tomorrow morning, it looks pretty dry this weekend, Tim. And and not only this weekend, but I hate to say this, it looks like the pattern gets pretty dry for the next 7 days now.
For the most part, yes. We definitely got that agreement that we were looking for the weekend. Things have settled down. Mostly no rain, maybe a shower tomorrow morning across the Carolinas.
Yeah.
But you're right, Sunday looks dry. I think Monday will be interesting because we get that cooler air dropping in and maybe sending us a bit of a wedge almost by Monday up in my area. Temperatures could be in the 50s by Monday afternoon with some scattered rain. And that might be your best chance of rain throughout the week, unfortunately. What also might be a little interesting, though, Brad, is, and the models don't have too much coming out of it, but by the end of next week, by like Wednesday and Thursday, we do have an upper level low that kind of sits overhead. And I wonder if anything would come up out of that. But there's possibility you at least would get some spotty showers. But sometimes you can get a few downpours that would just be very hit or miss. Sometimes you could even get some surprise hail out of those things in the springtime. So I wonder Wednesday, Thursday if we might get anything out of that system.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch because those are always, there's the old saying, upper lows, weatherman's woes, or however you want to say it, because those things can be really finicky. They can play with your temperature forecast. It could be much cooler. You also can get, like you said, kind of surprise severe weather. You can get some real pop up deep convection sometimes because the cold air aloft and could be pretty warm near the surface. So those are interesting. But when you look at the 7-day rainfall forecast, I don't like the trends in this. Let's take it for a grain of salt. It's just a 7-day trend. But we're starting to see that kind of storm track get pushed back to the south a little bit, which isn't ideal. We'd love to see 1 inch per week out of these 7-day rainfall forecasts, and it's going back down to like a quarter, half an inch. But it'll be interesting to see, like you said. I think that upper low is something for late next week because it does look like a warmer pattern by the end of next week as well. We start to see that trend in really warm conditions. I was looking at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlooks, and you kind of see this big ridge building over the middle of the country again. We're kind of in that near normal range, and then it starts to kind of get warmer. But the thing that stuck out to me on the precipitation part of this was, pretty dry little setup, at least for the next 7 days. And that's compared to average. Doesn't mean we can't see some rain out of one day, but it's definitely somewhat of a drier pattern going in to the end of next week, maybe so far. But we're getting to that point, Tim. We're getting towards the middle of May. We're not that far away. And it just, like we've said this, and I feel like we're a broken record. The drought's not going to end until next fall, maybe next spring or next. I said this upcoming fall or winter because there's really nothing in the pattern for May that looks like the pattern's going to flip. And then we get into the summer and you're relying on pop-up storms. So I think everything we thought about the drought is probably staying true outside of the fact that we got that one big rain for parts of the area yesterday. That might be just a one and done, and we're kind of in this dry pattern for a while.
I think so too. And so you're probably, just going to keep on keeping on with the dry weather. We probably get more of a high pressure type weather by Memorial Day weekend or so from the looks of things. That could be when you start to flex back. Because remember, we haven't had the heat anymore. Yes. April was the heat. We were so warm in April. I haven't made a graphic yet, but April for our area was 5 degrees warmer than May has been so far. And it's only been 8 days of May. But still, to be 5 degrees warmer for April versus May is kind of interesting to me, and something we might not remember how warm it already was. And that's partly why the drought's so bad too.
Yeah, I think that's been a saving grace, Tim, because it's bad enough you're in a drought, but when it's hot and dry, you're stressing the plants out. Evaporation rates are higher. Cooling it down at least slows down some of those processes a little bit and can let you kind of bide some time until maybe you get some rain. So that's a good point that we're seeing this slightly cooler pattern. Mm-hmm. I see you got a graphic with the Super El Nino up there, and we haven't really talked a lot about this, Tim. I think we briefly brushed on this, but I know I'm like you. We're pretty avid on social media. Follow a lot of great long range forecasters. There's a pretty I mean, I've never seen such a consensus in the climate models and the long range guidance for such a strong El Nino this far out. But it's like 100% certainty of a strong El Nino. You just don't see that very often.
You really don't. And I was, doing a little digging for, what we could be looking at for hurricane season. So I was curious about the El Nino stats. And they categorize these things in a couple ways. And if you're not a meteorologist, I wouldn't expect you to know these thresholds, but the area of water near the Pacific Ocean equator off of South America, when that's a half degree above average, that's when they classify it as an El Nino. It's got to be that way for a 3-month period. So it's not there yet. We're not technically in an El Nino yet, but it's developing. And the odds of it developing are so high, about 80-90% into the middle of the summer and toward fall. They call it a very strong one when it's 2 degrees or higher in Celsius. And this has only happened a couple times. Yeah. Most recently in 2015, 2016, it got up to 2.75, which as far as I could tell is the highest.
Yeah.
This year, the forecast is pushing it close to 3 as like a model consensus. 3 degrees above average. And so that is something I just wonder what the impacts will be. We know typically fewer hurricanes. We also know typically in an El Nino winter, you might cash in on some precipitation. But if you haven't seen something like that before, maybe it would be a little bit different. I don't know your thoughts about this. Ben Knoll put out a cool graphic about this today on Twitter that I was looking at for rainfall for our area.
Yeah, and I mean, typically for us in the cool season, it's wet and cool. But you're right. Sometimes these really extreme events like super El Ninos or even really strong La Ninas, they don't always play by the rules, Tim. Sometimes they do weird things because of how strong they are. And what's really interesting to me is from a global standpoint, outside of climate change, we know the planet is warming, but when you have that much warm water in the equatorial Pacific, Tim, it's naturally going to warm the climate as a whole. So you would think there's a pretty high probability from a global temperature standpoint that if this thing becomes a very strong or super El Nino, that the global temperatures for the next 6-12 months could be all-time highs, because that's just going to warm the atmosphere as a whole, especially as that ocean water transfers to the atmosphere.
Yeah, you're so right. And so across the globe, this could mean more heat, more drought, more things like that. What we were just showing you on the screen, though, that was the impact of a strong El Nino between November and January, specifically as it relates to precipitation. So we might be in big trouble between now and then. But there is a pretty strong signal that when you have these stronger El Nino events, we tend to have a more active jet stream in the south, and it tends to mean more rainfall. Maybe not as much snowfall, and that's what we would talk about later on, I guess. Maybe week by week in the wintertime there. But that would be at least an encouraging sign, if it were to pan out, that hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel eventually. It might just be hard to get there.
Which probably makes water restrictions more important, because and you're probably saying, well, why would we need water restrictions? We know rain's coming. Well, if we can water restrict now, that will help us get through the summer, knowing that down the road we're going to reverse this pattern. So we got to stretch the water supply right now. It's like rationing, right? Hey, we're going to get something down the road, but we get to ration now to stretch our current water. Speaking of the winter, and a lot of times, Tim, when I talk about our winter forecast and people get excited for El Nino because typically it means cool and wet, we should caution people that cool and wet doesn't always mean snow. Sometimes it's a lot of cold rains, which is a pretty typical setup for the Carolinas. So you always got to be careful. That doesn't mean always snow. It could be a lot of 40-degree rains, which are pretty common in El Nino winters around here.
The cooler can just mean more cloudy and more, wet and just not as much sunshine. It doesn't necessarily mean more Arctic outbreaks. At all. I certainly remember growing up in the Northeast, right, or people that go skiing up there or anything, they hate to see an El Nino coming. It doesn't mean that they're going to have a lot of Arctic air coming up that way. It means they're probably going to get a lot less snow, which to some people is good news and to others is bad news. It depends on your persuasion. But, that affects us too.
Yeah, and real quickly, I want to touch on this because we mentioned briefly yesterday, and kudos to the folks at the Weather Service at Jackson, Mississippi. We had this massive tornado touch down Wednesday night. They did a survey yesterday. Today, I pulled the map up and made a Google map, and look at the number of data points. Tim, you've looked at these damage surveys. This tells you that this damage survey crew did a lot of work because every one of those little icons is a damage indicator. So the Weather Service people, this is an amazing survey. It's so detailed, but this was the EF3 that went through southern Mississippi from East Franklin to Monticello, damaged a lot of property. The thing you notice, there's a line, that's the main track, but see the swath of the tornado icons? That's because this thing was like 1.5 miles wide, Tim. I mean, just crazy width to this thing, but it's just wild to see how big this tornado was. And we mentioned yesterday, amazing, no fatalities with this so far, at least as we know, from an EF3 that damaged over 500 homes at least. And so some of the video you're looking at is the destruction. The storm chasers were all over this, and we got firsthand accounts right away. But I mean, I just really can't say enough about how good the warning process was, but also the aftermath of how great the Weather Service was at going out and surveying this, because twofold. One, that's a lot of work, but that also shows there was a lot of damage indicators, meaning stuff got hit by this tornado.
It's really the biggest one so far this year, I believe, in the deep south. We've seen some in Oklahoma. We've seen some in the middle of the country. Illinois, I remember, of course, up in the Midwest. But, typically these hot spots, we talk about Tornado Alley shifting over the years. Mississippi, Alabama, that Dixie Alley, as some people tend to call it, hasn't been that active this year. And usually it flares up early in February and March. So it's been rare to see a drought of tornadoes down that way, but got really busy the other night. And like you said, just amazing to see that no one was killed. And so thankful of that as well for the good warning process. That's why we do what we do and why they do it so well in that busy part of the country.
Yeah, so I'm looking at just some of the stats. Touchdown at 7:32 local time, and was on the ground for an hour and a half for 35 miles, and was 2,050 yards wide, which is just over a mile wide, Tim. EF3, max winds around 140 miles per hour. So that was a significant tornado. And you're right, it's been pretty quiet in the southeast. It's mainly because we've been in the drought too, but it's been a drought of severe weather as well in the southeast, which is the peak season, March, April, May, and we just haven't had anything, which is crazy to see a storm like that. So that's also good news, because people, even without a lack of storms and kind of getting used to it this spring, they got one storm and they took the warning seriously.
Yeah, we're going on almost 2 months without a tornado warning in North Carolina, and we hope to keep that trend continuing.
Yeah, that's one drought I'm all for, Tim. We're out of time, everybody. Have a great weekend. If you're heading out to the Truist, enjoy the weekend, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.